Welcome to Mewoosh Guitar School. So we're going to talk today about guitars, what they are, what they do, and should you own a really expensive one or a cheap one? That depends. So this is real ground floor basic stuff, and it's certainly going to come at the beginning of your guitar journey. You're going to need to have some kind of guitar if you don't already, or if you're thinking about upgrading. So what makes a good guitar? That depends entirely on what you're going to do with it. What level of musician are you? So to analogize, what makes a good hammer? Well, it depends on what you want to do with it. Now, if you need a hammer because you need to hit things that are stuck or dislodge them or maybe drive a pry bar into something, you could use a rock or you could use a metal pipe. If you need a hammer because you want to drive a chisel, you could use a block of wood or a wooden mallet. If you need a hammer because you want to build a fence or do some framing, then you need something with a comfortable handle, and it's got to have a claw at one end and a head for like prying nails. So the person who just needs to hit stuff with something heavy could use a rock or a pipe or a proper hammer. But if you're a carpenter, then you need a proper hammer. You can't use a rock or a pipe. So that's the way it is with guitars. If you're a beginner, you could use something that's not very valuable and not well tuned or set up, but the more experienced you get, the less and less satisfied you're going to be with a guitar that's not very good. However, somebody who's just learning for the first time and their parents bought them a $2,000 guitar, they're really not going to appreciate the difference. It's still nice, but they're not really going to notice. So let's talk about guitar parts and then talk about what guitars do and how they do it. Okay, wait, hold up. I'm just about to talk about the parts of the guitar, and if you already know what a guitar is and what all the parts are and you're not confused by any of that, then you can skip that bit. So I've cut that out of the video and it's in a separate video, links right there. If you want to see me talk about here's all the different parts and here's what they do and how a guitar actually makes sound, you can check that out. Otherwise, we're just going to get back into the issues of playability. What affects guitar playability and what doesn't? There's certain things that are tone things that are going to matter maybe later on in your journey, and there's certain things that are playability things that are going to hit you now. And you'll either hate yourself for getting some really cheap thing, or maybe you'll hate yourself for spending way too much when you could have gotten away with less. We'll talk about that now. So, the factors that affect playability. Tuning stability is a major issue with guitars. So that's a thing. If you've got cheap tuners that don't hold the string very well, or the string slips off the tuners, the gearing is poor, that is going to affect the sound. It's not going to be in tune and it's going to sound bad. The more experienced a musician you are, the more you're going to notice that kind of thing. These are clues on vintage reissue tuners. They're really nice. They do have a lot of slack in them because they're vintage reissue, so they were made with that sort of original spec, if you like. The tuners that I have on my double neck 6-string are the sort of clues on style tuners that Fender Squier uses, and I actually got them off of a Squier vintage modified or something similar anyway. Those are great, and they're made with a much more modern gearing spec. These are a 19-to-1 ratio, so they hold tune terrifically well. The more standard tuners, like on my other guitar, are 14-to-1. This is still fine, but also if I want to flatten the string or lower the pitch of the string somewhat, I can just back the tuner off a bit, and it has an immediate effect, and it stays where I put it. I love that. These tuners, you have to back them off a lot and then come back up because there's so much slack in the gearing. It's just the way they were designed, but people just like it that way. So it's kind of stuck around. Another issue affecting playability is neck relief, which is how bent is the neck because of the strings pulling on it. And then there's a truss rod, a metal rod that goes through the neck, which then fights against that. And so you strike a balance between the tension of the truss rod and the tension of the strings pulling it the other way. And then you have to have just the right kind of curvature in the neck. It does curve forward very, very slightly. The action is the height of the strings over the frets. You'll notice this is straight, the nut. The bridge is not. It's got like a zigzag in it, and that's because the different strings have different diameters. So intonation is the adjustment of these bridge saddles to make sure that the guitar is playing in tune on each of the strings. These are all issues of guitar setup. Typically, these are things that can be changed. But there is also a matter of neck stability, which is how well does the neck stay in tune when the humidity in the air changes from one season to the next. So I live up in Canada. It gets really dry in the wintertime and it gets really humid in the summertime. And if the wood is really stable, it's not going to adjust to those changes. It just stays where it is. If the neck is what is called unstable, it's something that's constantly bending and warping with the weather, and then you have to keep adjusting the truss rod to compensate for that. The weight of the guitar is another issue. Depends on the material that was used in it. I had a guitar once that was white ash. It weighed a ton. It had to be like 13 pounds. Oh, it just hurt my shoulders to play it. But it was solid, and the wood actually does make a difference. Not everybody can hear it. It's a very, very slight difference. This is a huge argument that people have online. It's best to stay out of it, but some people swear blind that tone wood, that's what they call it, the tone wood is a thing and it makes a major difference, and they hate maple necks and they prefer mahogany necks, or they hate, the alder basswood bodies. It has to be a mahogany body, or a chambered maple, or whatever. Does it make a difference? It must. Scientifically, it must make a difference. Can you hear the difference? Maybe not. I'm convinced that some people do. The pickups are going to make a way bigger difference in the tone, and how you play, what you're doing with your hands. It's going to make a way, way, way bigger difference than the wood material will. If mahogany makes you feel good, then you'll feel better while you're playing and you'll have a better time. We'll look at it that way. Anyway, the string gauge is important. The lighter the strings are, the more they'll go slightly out of tune. If you strum them really hard, they'll go sharp more than they will if they're heavier gauge. The heavier ones, I think, are going to be a little more stable, but they're also harder to bend. It takes a lot more force. Now, strumming, you're not going to notice the difference, but bending, you're going to notice. If you've got a set of 12s on an electric, that's going to hurt your fingers quick, and your hands will get tired. If you've got like 8s, you're going to find them flopping and sounding a little rubbery if you're strumming them hard. Billy Gibbons plays 7 to, I don't know what, 7 to 40 or something like that, and he just has a very, very light touch. He just strums it super light and has the gain way up on his amp, and he gets the tone he does, and he sounds great. So you can't argue that he would sound better with heavier gauge strings. No, he wouldn't. Somebody else would. Anyway, it's a matter of preference. Good place to start is 9 to 42, I think. They call them extra light. The material your strings are made of, whether they're nickel or stainless, whether or not they're round wound strings, flat wound, or some combination between them, it's going to make noise when you can hear this. That's my skin going across the windings on the strings. The round wound ones are the most common. My bass has flat wound, just because I don't want to hear that sound when I'm playing bass. The coating on the strings, I think these are Elixir Polyweb. They're more expensive. They're probably twice the price of what you could find for cheap strings. The shape of the neck is a factor, how it fits in your hand. I mentioned how fat this neck is. I like it for chords. It just feels better than having a really thin neck, because I tend to do what this is called a blues grip, and you wrap your thumb around it. Hendrix did that. That's not the reason I do it, but he did. Some people keep their thumb right on the back of the guitar, which is certainly more classical and traditional. The finish is a major issue. So I was at a guitar store a few days ago and playing thin line telly, and it just had this thick polyester finish on the neck, and then my hand would just stick to it. The controls are going to have some impact on, not on tone obviously, but on playability. Whether or not the switch is down here or over here. Gretsch puts the one up here. If it's where you like it, if it's where you're likely to use it, if you use it at all. This guitar doesn't have a tone control because I don't tend to use the tone control. I don't adjust the tone while I'm playing. So I just set the amp to the way this guitar sounds best, and that works for me. Now there's some issues that don't affect playability at all. The pickups, they affect the tone significantly. I think they have among the greatest effects. Obviously your hands are the number one. Your amp is like what settings you're using on your amp, what type of amp, and that kind of thing is going to have a major impact, and the pickups are going to have an equal impact. But for playability, you don't touch them. They're not going to be in your way. As I mentioned, different wood materials theoretically make a difference in the tone, but not really the playability. Certainly once a guitar's got paint and some kind of urethane or cellulose whatever finish on it, it just feels like a smooth shiny thing. Doesn't matter what kind of wood's underneath it. It might sound different, it might not sound different to you, but playability isn't impacted, other than maybe the weight. If it's super heavy, that might be an issue. SGs tend to be neck heavy, so when you're playing it, the neck wants to fall down like that. That's a playability issue. The orientation of the headstock is an issue for aesthetics, but not for playability. It doesn't make a difference. I find this is a sort of a conventional headstock, 6 in line, so not 3 and 3 like the electric or like my acoustic is, but a reverse headstock like I have on the double neck. The 6 string is a reverse, and I'm not a big fan of reverse headstock tuning, like coming at it from this side. Not a fan. I prefer it from here. So I pluck with my thumb, and I can see the tuners, and they all turn the same way to tighten. It's just my preference. What you like is going to be impacted by what looks good to you as well as what feels good to you, and those are all important factors. So what about cheap guitars? Well, cheap guitars were put together quickly. That's where they're saving their money. The difference is really in how carefully the guitar was assembled. I wouldn't buy a guitar for less than $450, $500. A good target, once you've been playing for a while and definitely want to not waste your time with low quality, would be maybe $800 or $900. I don't think I would go as high as $1,500, and I certainly wouldn't go up into the thousands. I have friends with multi-$1,000 guitars, and I just don't see I just don't see the benefit of it. Well, I hope this was helpful for you. If you are looking to upgrade your guitar, spend your money wisely and don't go for the cheapest guitar you can find. Buying used is a great idea because a lot of people buy a guitar thinking they're going to play it and then they don't. If you know how to set up a guitar, there are good deals to be found when somebody is selling a guitar because it's set up so poorly that they can't play it. And if you'll know when you're holding it, if the strings are a mile off the fretboard maybe, or the bridge is a completely screwy setup. Few people think about putting a shim in the neck joint to re-angle the neck, and then they set the guitar up differently. You could fix a guitar that was unplayable just by changing the setup. There's a lot of money to be saved there if you have the skills. So I've got some videos if you want to know what that kind of work looks like. Check those out. But I would say spend your money wisely. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video. Please subscribe if you're not a subscriber to this channel. I've got a lot more videos to come in Mewoosh Guitar School. And there's other videos on building guitars that I'm going to do that are coming up. And all sorts of fun. So I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.